Today, we're going to be going over the 5 teams that have won NBA free agency so far. Starting with the NBA champs, the Los Angeles Lakers traded Danny Green and the number 28 pick for Dennis Schroeder before re-signing KCP on 3 years, $39 million. They signed Wesley Matthews, one year, $3 million. Signed Montrezl Harrell, 2 year, $19 million with a player option at the end of that. And then signed Marc Gasol, 2 year, $5.3 million, and re-signed Markieff Morris for 1 year, $2.3 million. In doing the Marc Gasol signing, they had to trade JaVale McGee for Jordan Bell and Alfonso McKinnie, who they waived for cap space. And all in all, you're looking at the departures of JaVale McGee, Rajon Rondo, Avery Bradley, Quinn Cook, and Dwight Howard for the names that I mentioned before. So, Colin, how do you feel like the Lakers did this offseason so far?
I think the Lakers, honestly did the best that they could possibly do. You replace the guys that you lost in Avery Bradley and Rajon Rondo with Dennis Schroeder, and then re-signing KCP, and then you get Wesley Matthews as well. And then you also get bench scoring with Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder, like I mentioned before, which this team didn't really have. You had coming off the bench like Kyle Kuzma, KCP, Alex Caruso. Yeah. So now you have 2 finalists for Sixth Man of the Year coming in just to like light up the second unit. And then Marc Gasol. You upgrade the center spot a whole lot. When he's on the floor, defense is going to get better, and then you're going to have a lot more assists and the ball moving around a lot more instead of kind of, you don't need him to be a rim running guy. He's going to be able to have the ball in his hands and make passes. So I think they've upgraded every position. And then you mentioned that they got rid of Danny Green. I think we both know that Danny Green kind of was, after his playoff performance, kind of lost his job in a sense. Yeah. And they replaced him, like I said, with Wes Matthews, and then you re-signed KCP for that $40 million.
Yeah, and the Montrezl Harrell addition was the one that was everybody was talking about, right? Mm-hmm. This is going from the Clippers to the Lakers. He looked limited in his bubble appearances in the playoffs, especially against the Nuggets. But one thing that I've been saying is that the Montrezl Harrell that we saw in the bubble was very different from the Montrezl Harrell we saw in the regular season. Right. In the regular season, he was far and away the Sixth Man of the Year. Like, he was playing well enough. Like, there's a reason he won the award. Like, he was playing that well. And that just didn't translate after the pandemic. He came in a little overweight. He had the passing of a family member, yep. So he got a late start. All of that, he just didn't look like himself. If the Lakers get the version of him that won Sixth Man of the Year, then he's already an upgrade over JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard. Then you add Marc Gasol, and then you're really looking at a front court that's versatile, mm-hmm. right? They didn't have versatility last year. You had to just bang over guys. You had to dunk on people. You had to throw the lobs. This year, they could stretch the floor. They can rebound better. They're versatile, and that's what's dangerous about this team moving forward, is not only are they going to have the same talent off the bench in, Alex Caruso and Kyle Kuzma and Markieff Morris as well, but they're going to have more versatility in front court to match with LeBron James. So he doesn't have to bang as much. I think that's really interesting. And I think the Lakers have they've done a great job this offseason. The Portland Trail Blazers, Colin, Dame Dollar. I'm not a Trailblazers fan, but, had to respect Damian Lillard. It looks like they're going all in. And cool. Once I read these moves to you, you can tell me what you think. Yeah. So they traded Trevor Ariza and a 2021 protected first round pick and the number 16 pick in the 2020 draft for Robert Covington. Then they traded Mario Hezonja to Memphis for Enes Kanter in a 3-team deal. They re-signed Carmelo Anthony, signed Harry Giles on a 1-year deal, signed Rodney Hood on a 2-year, $21 million deal, and signed Derek Jones on a 2-year, $19 million deal. They lost Kent Bazemore and Hassan Whiteside, but we know what they have coming back in Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Zach Collins, Yusuf Nurkic, all those guys, Anthony Simons as well. So how do you feel like the Blazers did this offseason so far?
I feel like they're obviously one of the better teams because they've just improved their team so much. Just Robert Covington alone gives them like one defender that they never had all last season. You were going to hope that was Trevor Ariza, but that didn't pan out, obviously. You kind of put air quotes around going all in, and I think that's a great way to put it, because what are you going all in for? Because the talent that they got still isn't really that great. Yeah, you get Derek Jones Jr. He was on the Heat in the finals, didn't play a single minute really in that final series with the Lakers. You get Robert Covington. That's probably your only really, really, really good pickup. You get Harry Giles, who didn't really do anything on the Kings on a minimum deal. It's just, there's lots of moves that look really good, but you have to have him pan out, and I think that's going to be the most interesting thing to see.
I mean, that's what the Blazers have been with under Terry Stotts and with Damian Lillard. It's always been like, oh, well, they have something this year, and then they've just never had it, right? So even last year and the year before, we were always like, okay, maybe they can do it this year. If they get Nurkic back, they can do this. And albeit Nurkic's health hasn't helped them, but it's definitely not been the reason that they haven't been able to get over the hump. And this, while it feels like they're giving a little bit of insurance for themselves because they're going to have Zach Collins and they're going to have Nurkic and going to be able to have Jones maybe play the 4, the 3, Giles as well was not bad. Enes Kanter, it's nothing that's going to move the needle enough to break into that top 3, 4. Like, I mean, are we picking them over the Mavericks still? Probably not. Like, it's their defense is still not going to be good, even though they have one defender now in Robert Covington. And maybe Derrick Jones Jr. can help that as well. But it's like what are we doing here, right? If you're not going to trade CJ McCollum, if you're not going to go all in and you're not going to try to get a second star like a Paul George type deal, then you're just going to be sitting here at the 5 seed, the 6 seed. And that's best case scenario because they've been the 8 seed for a long time. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. They've relied on Dame and CJ McCollum throughout their whole entire careers to kind of carry this team, and they just kind of throw random pieces around them. It almost makes you think, like, what is their end goal? And right now it just seems like, I mean, that they're honestly just trying to play for that 5 seed spot. I
mean, they did have the one year where they made the conference finals. Was that 2 years ago?
2 years ago, yep.
But that felt like an outlier much more than it did like a moment for them. And I think that a lot of this is going to come down to the development of Anthony Simons, the development of Zach Collins, and then hopefully you can just get some other pieces from Enes Kanter. And that's not even to start to talk about the fact that Damian Lillard has to play at an MVP level every single game just for the chance. Again, for like the 5th straight season.
Another guy we forgot to mention was Rodney Hood. I mean, he was injured last year with a knee injury. I mean, he can give you something offensively, but again, this team has no defense still. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they stop a team like the Lakers, like you mentioned, the Mavs, the Clippers. I mean, all those guys have wing defenders, and they also have scoring. I mean, the Mavs had the number 1 offense last year. So it's going to be weird to see how they kind of try to stop that with the guys that they got. Yeah,
Portland was 3rd in offensive rating last year and 28th in defensive rating, and they didn't really do much to change those numbers. The teams of the bubble, the Phoenix Suns, after going 8-0 in that bubble, are now looking to really make a push for the postseason and maybe even some higher seeds. Obviously, they traded for Chris Paul and Abdul Nader, getting rid of Kelly Oubre, Ricky Rubio, Ty Jerome, and Jalen Leck, and a 2022 second protected first-round pick. Then they signed Jay Crowder to a 3-year deal, signed Javon Carter to a 3-year deal, signed Damian James and Etwan Moore before re-signing Dario Saric and signing Langston Galloway. Colin, did the Suns do enough?
When they traded for Chris Paul, I was kind of skeptical, but I mean, man, they got a team now. I mean, you have Devin Booker, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, and then you have the guys that they just got. Sorry?
Jay Crowder, exactly. You have, I mean, he was just in the finals. So, I mean, you got this team's better than the OKC team that Chris Paul kind of dragged to that 5 seed. And then with Monty Williams, the head coach, I think, like you said, they could contend for one of the top seeds. I mean, you could argue like 4. What's a top seed?
4 or 5. I mean, I think 1 and 2 are locked already. I mean, I think we both know that. I don't think so. Who would you put above them?
I'm just saying, well, we're not going to get into team debates here, but I'm going to say that outside of those top 3 players, it's murky for me, right? Like you have Ayton, you have Booker, and you have Paul.
Yes.
And then you have good players, like you have fine players. You have Dario Saric back, like that's really good.
Yes.
And you have Cameron Johnson, who was a fine player.
Jay Crowder.
Jay Crowder, who's a fine player. They lost Frank Kaminsky, Czech Diallo, and they lost Aaron Baines, which we didn't talk about beforehand. But they're gonna have to get something from other guys, or is it just gonna be a rocket development of Devin Booker? Like, is that what it's going to take?
I mean,
for
I
them
don't know
do
if we need
that?
to see rocket development from Devin Booker. I think we've seen what he does and what he's able to do. It's just kind of been the guys around him and the coaching staff that was around him. I think Monty Williams has kind of changed the culture on that team. And then you add a veteran in Chris Paul, where it's no longer, you know, a Ricky Rubio who's like an above average guard. And if Chris Paul can play up to 90% of what he has, you know, the last year, I think that this team, like I said, I mean, are they better than the Nuggets after the offseason that they have?
No.
I think they could be. I think they could be.
You still have, they still have Javon Carter, Mikal Bridges. You have talented players, Etuan Moore, Damian Jones. I mean, you got talented players. It's just the depth that's a concern for me right now, right? And that's what I think is going to hold them back a little bit. I think they still get a top 7 seed. I just don't know. I don't know how much. I just don't know how much they go past that.
7 seed. Okay.
But we'll see. Behind the pressure of Anthony Resler, the owner of the Atlanta Hawks, GM Travis Schlenk has been put in a position where the Hawks need to make the playoffs this season. And they made some moves over this offseason that I think they're going to have a good shot at doing that, especially in the East, at least. So they traded Dwayne Dedmon for Kyrie Thomas and Tony Snell. Then they signed Danilo Gallinari to a 3-year, $62 million deal, signed Chris Dunn to a 2-year deal, signed Rajon Rondo to a 2-year deal, and agreed to a sign and trade for Bogdan Bogdanovic on a 4-year, $72 million deal before signing Solomon Hill to round out their offseason so far. You look at the departures: Vince Carter, Dwayne Dedmon, DeAndre Bembry, Jeff Teague, and Evan Turner highlight that list. Colin, I'll turn it over to you. Do you think the Hawks have done enough?
They should have. I mean, they have Trae Young and John Collins, Onyeka, Clint Capella.
DeAndre Hunter.
Yeah, DeAndre Hunter. If you can't make the playoffs in the East with that team without all their other signings, then there's another issue at hand. But I mean, they kind of swung for the fence, especially with that Danilo Gallinari contract. It's interesting. He's the only player to make that much money and not have made an all-star game. So yes, he's very good, but he's also, I think, 32. So that's going to be interesting. It's a weird swing in a way, but it can pay off. It's a very high risk, what's the reward?
A reward?
Yeah, sorry, couldn't get that out. High risk, high reward. I mean, if it works, then you could probably see them being, you know, like a 6 seed maybe in the East. But if it doesn't work, you know, now you're stuck with those contracts, and I think that's where the ownership GM relationship kind of can mess things up.
Yeah, it's made it weird in the fact that ideally you'd like another year to where you get another year of Trae Young development, John Collins, DeAndre Hunter, Kevin Huerter, Cam Reddish. Like, all 5 of those guys are 20 to 22 years old. You want to know what you have before you kind of move all in. But like I mentioned before, the dynamic of the owner GM has kind of pushed this into hyperdrive, right? And it's filled out a roster where you have a lot of good players, but who's really complementing Trae Young? Like, who's his second option here, right?
Right.
You want it to be John Collins because he can score the ball, but you know, you had the problems off the court, and then you had the problems with his defense. And I mean, he could put the ball in the hole, but he obviously, with Danilo Gallinari, you assume that he's going to step in and play the 4 for them. And then you move John Collins to center, but you have Clint Capella. It's just, this team is a bunch of different pieces that I'm worried that they're not going to work out, but I think there's too much talent in this team not to make the playoffs in the East.
Right.
Like, you look at them versus Orlando, like, right? This team has way more talent than Orlando, and Orlando's been in the playoffs year after year. And that's where I think this team is going to be good enough to make a 7 seed in the East. And I think if they can put it all together, I think they're a very, very interesting team, a very fun team.
Yep.
But it's just getting that defense to where they're not last in the NBA in points allowed per game, and they're not 27th in defensive rating. So.
And not only that, like you mentioned, their age, you'd like them to develop more. You'd like to put this team around a 24, 25-year-old Trae Young as opposed to like a 22-year-old Trae Young. And same goes for all the other young guys, just so then you can see, like you said, what they are, but also, you know, make sure, like, okay, how is Trae Young going to play as he develops? Is his defense going to get better? You know, what does he need around him? And it's an interesting swing for the fence. I like it because the East sucks, but you know, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, They got Chris Dunn to help them with defense, you'd hope. Gallinari is not a great defender by any means. Rondo's not a good defender by any means in the regular season, that is. Bogdanovic, that's a lot of money to pay to someone you know what he is. It's really just going to develop on, it's going to depend on the development of the guys that I mentioned before.
Right,
like
core.
all of those guys, those four, and even Jabari Parker, who's 24 years old at this point, and you're going to need something out of him. There's so many questions about this team that it's a really fascinating move for this team to go all in the way that they have.
Agreed.
And obviously in 3 years, they're going to have all this money off the books, and you'll be able to, not have DeAndre Hunter, or you'll have an option on him. You have different options there. So it's kind of like you've locked in these next 2 to 3 years. This is what we're going to do. We're going to make the playoffs as a 6-5, hopefully maybe a 4 seed if we get lucky in 2 years. But, so I like the move. I'm just wondering if it's limited their ceiling in the coming season.
Right, because it all depends on the development of that core that you mentioned.
Exactly. And maybe they're great. Maybe they're multiple All-Stars, but we'll just have to find out. The Milwaukee Bucks enter the 2020-21 season looking for answers and looking for wins right now as Giannis enters the final year of his contract. So, Colin, we all know about the big trade for Drew Holiday where they gave up George Hill, Eric Bledsoe, swapped the 2024 and 2026 picks, and then gave up straight away unprotected 2025 and 2027 picks to the New Orleans Pelicans. They also got Sam Merrill in that trade, the 60th pick in the draft. They signed Bryn Forbes on a 2-year deal, signed Torrey Craig, signed Pat Connaughton on a 3-year deal, signed DJ Augustine on a 3-year deal, and signed Bobby Portis on a 2-year deal. That's a lot.
Yes.
Do you think it's enough for them to contend for a title?
I mean, you have Giannis.
I don't even want to say contend for a title.
Yeah.
It's enough to win a title, because that's what it's going to take.
I was going to say, it was like, you have Giannis.
Yeah.
I think the big thing that killed him was the coaching in the finals. I mean, every Bucks fan you're playing Giannis 33, 34 minutes. First of all, that's the first thing that has to change. Now, the roster around them, you lose Wes Matthews. That's a huge hit. But you do get Drew Holiday, which, makes up for, that perimeter defense. Lots of players consider him the best perimeter defender in the league. This is definitely an all-in move, and not only that, it's a move to keep Giannis on the team for a Supermax deal. And I would say that if you're not in the finals this next year with this team, with this roster that they've assembled, because it adds depth and it adds assumably a better point guard.
Yeah.
Then that's your ceiling, in my opinion. I mean, Giannis is considered by some to be the best player in the league, but if with this roster you can't get there with him, there's some concerns there.
Yeah, and they waived Ersan Ilyasova. They lost Wes Matthews. They lost Robin Lopez, along with the guys that they traded. It's just curious to me because that they wanted to go get a second star, like along with Chris Middleton, who is obviously a very good player. I don't know if he's a star, but he's a very good player. So they went for Drew Holiday, and then they went and signed Pat Connaughton, Torrey Craig, DJ Augustine, Bobby Portis, and Bryn Forbes. All 5 of those are good players, but they're limited players.
Yeah.
Right. And so those are the guys that you're going to want to step in and play meaningful minutes in the postseason. That's my only question here is, did they do enough to get over the hump of the Nets potentially? And whoever else in the East that steps up, because we know there's going to be those teams that just step up. If the Heat can continue what they've done, that's going to be another tough opponent. Ultimately, I think the Bucks did do a good job this offseason, but it's ultimately going to come back to Giannis, right?
Absolutely.
It's going to come back. Can Giannis make open threes? Can Giannis learn how to play around help, around double teams, around charges? It's all of those factors. And if he can do that, this team can very, very, very easily make the finals. If not, then there might be a second round out again. And that's where it's just tough to gauge what exactly they need for this team. Right.
And you mentioned the Heat. I would say that the pickups that they got are not physical guys that you would need to compete with the Heat. Yes, you get Drew Holiday, but DJ Augustine is your backup point guard. I mean, he's obviously like 5'10".
Bryn Forbes is basically unplayable.
Bryn Forbes is basically unplayable on defense. Pat Connaughton, I mean, I know Bucks fans don't like him at all. So, I mean, you get Torrey Craig. So, I mean, there's a wing guy, but he's not he's not going to give you 10 points or 11 points every game or anything like that. Yeah. So you got to take some and lose some with your lineups. And I think at the end of the day, it comes back to coaching. And then secondly, it comes back to Giannis.